Hi, everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people sign on and get connected to audio. I do see we've got some community members here, which is great. Let me bring up our PowerPoint here. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, we still have some participants that are coming in to the meeting, so we're just going to let everybody in for right now. But I want to welcome you all to our third and final workshop for the Beeline routing study. Again, we're really excited for you all to join us. We have a short presentation here this morning, this afternoon, followed by a question and answer session. We also have the draft plan available online. And so we'll be able to share that with you all in a little bit. But again, really excited to have you all here. So with that, and again, we still have people signing in, which is fantastic. But I'm going to get started at least with a few of the Zoom instructions. So as you might have seen when you got in here, this meeting is being recorded. We want to make sure that we have a copy of it on our project website within the next 2 weeks. Also, you are muted upon entry, so you won't be able to unmute yourself. You can put all of your questions in through our chat box throughout our presentation and during the question and answer session. If at the end of the question and answer session we have time, we'll be able to unmute you and you can interact with the project team. But again, make sure that you see the chat box function in your Zoom tools and interact with us through there. So again, this evening, we are going to introduce the project team. We're going to do a couple of live polls to understand where you guys are from. We're going to bring in Gordon to give a little bit of project background. He's going to review the elements of the draft plan. And as I mentioned, we have a great, plenty of time at the end for our question and answer session and our next steps on how you can stay involved in the plan. So with that, I'm going to introduce our project team. And you guys can all wave on the screen when I say your name. So with BCAG today, we have Sarah Kane. We have John Clark, Victoria Proctor, and Amy White. On the consulting side from LSC, we have Gordon Shaw. I think Gordon's on the phone by himself today, but he had two great team members that were a part of this project with him. We had Selena and Claire. And then here with AIM Consulting, it's myself and Katie Owen. So Katie Owen is in our chat box with technical support. So if you need anything, please reach out to her. And so with that, I'm going to start our first live poll. Oh, no, I'm not. Hold on. Here we go. And so on your screen here, I'm going to launch. You're going to see two questions. We want to know, do you currently use the Beeline service? The second question we want to know is, where do you spend most of your time in Butte County? This could be working, this could be living. Again, just a few demographic questions so that we understand who's in the room today. I'll be able to share the results here in just a few minutes, or just about a minute or so. All right. 12. All right. Looks like we had just about 12 of 13 here. So I'm going to share the results really quick. So again, it looks like we have a lot of people here from Chico tonight, which is great. And we have a split on users between yes and no. So that's fantastic as well. So I'll be back here in just a little bit with some more polls. Sorry, my computer is super sensitive. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Sarah with BCAG.
Thanks, Katie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Kane. I'm a senior planner here at BCAG. Just wanted to provide a little bit of overview of who BCAG is and why we're responsible for doing this study. So BCAG stands for the Butte County Association of Governments. We are a regional transportation planning agency, a metropolitan planning organization, and also the owner and operator of Butte Regional Transit. And so as the RTPA and MPO, BCAG is responsible for preparing all state and federally required transportation plans and programs. And those are what's necessary for securing funding for highways, streets and roads, transit, bike and pedestrian facilities, and other transportation modes. Next slide, please. And as the owner and operator of Beeline, we're preparing a routing study, which we're meeting here today to share with you all. The main points of the routing study are to look at Beeline routes and schedules, to review fare policies and fare media, to evaluate technologies, vehicle needs, facilities, and other assets. Also, we're looking at our strengths and weaknesses, hoping to hear from you all on that. And looking at evaluating service options to improve the functionality of transit in Butte County. That's really the main meat of this project. And also with the public input, it's looking to identify preferred service alternatives and developing a plan for implementation. Next slide, please. And just a few of our study goals. These are kind of the three main ones. We are looking to provide recommendations effectively to expand mobility, identify and thoroughly evaluate alternative routing options, and develop innovative solutions that make the best use of Beeline's existing resources. And I'd like to hand it over to Gordon to share a little bit of the existing conditions analysis with you all.
Thank you, Katie, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. Yes, as Gordon, as the principal of LSC Transportation Consultants, I'm been leading the study team on this study, and we have done a lot of work at looking at where we are and what has happened with the system over the last few years, and learning from that what works and to some degree what doesn't work. So that we can apply that to the plan going forward. A lot of analysis in our draft documents about the existing services and our analysis of that. We looked at every route. We looked at ridership and productivity by time of day, by community, by day of week, by route segment, what segments are busy, what segments are not. A quick overview here of that. In terms of demographics, Butte County has a high proportion of residents that need transit services. So compared to other areas of the state, a little bit more low-income residents and more senior residents and residents with a disability. So there certainly is a need for persons who don't have a car, as well as people who choose not to have a car. We really find that transit service is important for both institutes of higher learning, Chico State as well as Butte College, and it's important for the function of those campuses. As you can see in our little chart there, transit ridership declined with the pandemic, and it was actually on a bit of a decline. I wouldn't say more than a bit. It was pretty consistent decline before the pandemic, and you can remember back to before the pandemic still. It was a era where the economy was getting better, where cars were relatively inexpensive. And this is something that a lot of transit systems, really almost all of them around the country, were seeing. And then the pandemic didn't help by quite a long ways. But there's some good news. Over the last 2 years or so, the ridership has increased by about 35% from the lows. But I think we have to be realistic to say that there are changes in society, things like people working from home, changes in programs and so on. So we're not really expecting to get back to that almost 1.4 million riders a year for a very long time. But transit still has important functions. It's very important for many people in the community, and it needs to be supported. So let's go off to the next one. We'll walk around some of the areas here, but in terms of existing conditions, there's areas of Chico that generate low ridership. You can see the Route 7 area there up above Bidwell Park and so on. That was relatively low. Route 16 out to the northwest there. But we really also have corridors that are high ridership between downtown and the mall and Butte College City Campus, as well as going up to the north side of the community. One of the patterns that we saw in looking at the ridership patterns is not everyone wants to be downtown or to Chico State. And there's quite a lot of ridership up in the northern part of the community of Chico. And so that got us thinking about focusing more services on North Valley Plaza as a transfer point. But we also have some neighborhoods that are not served, and you can see kind of in the middle there, and or off to the west. So some things to think about as we're looking at alternatives. Next slide. Looking at Oroville, there's basically we've been running 2 buses in Oroville. One bus that does 2 routes and another bus that does another 2 routes every 2 hours. What we're finding is that the ridership is mostly concentrated in the kind of core area, and not so much in the outlying areas out to the casino and so on. On-time dependability is a problem in Oroville. It's a problem somewhat in Chico, but more in Oroville. We're probably trying to do too much with those 2 vehicles in Oroville. We do find that we could use smaller vehicles and carry the passenger load there, so that's an opportunity. Then going up the ridge, looking in Paradise and Magalia, we've got 2 routes that serve that area, 40 that goes as far as Paradise and kind of does that lower loop, and then 41 that goes all the way up to Magalia. And there's some other loops off of this main route that get done at certain times of day. But one of the challenges up on the ridge is that you can look at the route and say, well, there's not a whole lot of the community that is within a convenient walk distance of the routes. So that's one of our concerns there. And also that there's low productivity on the service up there. We are running buses that run for an hour and they may serve 4 or 5 passengers. So that's a concern. There is a need for a better plan to serve the pattern up there. So with that, let's go off to the next one. We have done a lot of outreach as part of this with Katie's help. You can see some of the the figures there. We did surveyed riders, got 280 responses from that. So we have a good idea what the riders think. We have had 2 virtual workshops similar to this through the course of the study and got very good input there, and that helped to shape our plan. We've done all our outreach is in English and Spanish as well as Hmong to try and make sure that we are reaching everyone in the community. A little bit about what we've heard, and I could go on for hours, and you probably don't want me to do that. But about 1/3 of the passengers are students. About 1/3 of them are going to work, and our 1/3 are people who are traveling for other reasons. I think that those numbers are important because it really tells us that Beeline is important for the economy of the area, that it's getting people to work. Employers can have employees, which is an important thing these days. The riders are very happy with the service overall. 87% gave it an overall score of either good or excellent on the scale of 1 to 5. They really like the drivers. They appreciate the affordability. They would really like to have better bus stops and better information at the bus stops. That was the key things. And then request for more frequent weekend service and more shelters. I think I have one more. Nope. So let's go into the draft plan here. And I'm going to kind of go off a little bit on a tangent, because one of the things you're going to see in kind of all 3 urban areas that we are talking about is something called microtransit. And this is a real trend in transit for areas that are difficult for fixed route services to serve. Areas that are more spread out, perhaps lower density, are in lower demand areas. But what microtransit is essentially a public transit version of an Uber or a Lyft. It being public transit, it's not quite as fast and speedy as an Uber or a Lyft. Typically, what these services are, it's a general public, so it's open to everybody, on-demand service. They use an app that people download on their phones. You can get a ride by by just hitting the app. And on the right there's an example of somebody who hit the app, and you can watch the vehicle come to you on your phone, just like you can an Uber. You can also call. So it is certainly feasible to call the dispatcher and say, this is where I'd like to get picked up. Put me in the queue. Like so much these days, it takes the software to organize the trip, and then to tell the drivers, this is where you're going next, this is who you're going to pick up. It tells you as the passenger that your driver's name is Bill, and he'll be there in 3, 2, 1 minutes, and take you where you need to go. It is as I mentioned, not as instantaneous as an Uber. Typically, they're designed, and we put out enough vehicles so that we can handle most or almost all of the trips within 30 minutes. So which is more frequent than most of the fixed route buses. So it can be more convenient than the fixed route. And typically we charge the same fare as the fixed route fare, so that it's equitable between parts of a community that has fixed route or parts that has microtransit. But that's kind of a quick overview on that. I will say that there are microtransit services that are in place in Sacramento, in Napa, in Reno, Nevada, that have been in for years, down in Bakersfield. So it is something that is really becoming much more common and effective in certain areas. Let's go on. So with all that said, what we are proposing, and you can see the map to the right there, is that we set up 2 zones in Chico for microtransit. One, the east zone there, is essentially replacing the existing Route 7, which is good because we can take the dollars that go into Route 7 and instead put it into the microtransit zone. And then another one, that north microtransit zone, that is replacing the area that's served by Route 16 at the north end, and then 52 that goes up to the airport. So again, we can reuse those resources in a microtransit zone. So in each one of those zones, you can get picked up and dropped off and any place within that zone. Each zone also has some transfer points that are shown with some little symbols there, like at North Valley Plaza. That north microtransit zone would come in and then make a direct transfer to the fixed route. So if you want to go downtown, we'll pick you up, we'll take you to a fixed route, you'll walk across the platform and get on the fixed route bus. Some other changes here, Route 15 currently goes to the DMV, just to the southwest there of North Valley Plaza. We're trying to streamline the routes and improve some of the on-time performance. So we're shifting DMV from actually Route 2 is who serves it now. We'll shift that to 15. Right now, Route 5 in the kind of the eastern side there at Springfield Drive, if you know that area near Coles and everything, that is only served in one direction. So it's a lot of time riding the bus to try and get to the stop because it's only one direction. We figured out a way to make it 2 directions. Route 17 and 14 used to both be on one route or on one street, and we'd like to move that over to Fair Street so that the Jesus Center there and some of the other activities along Fair Street now will have hourly transit service. They do get a little service today with Route 41, but not much. Route 9, we are proposing to move over a few blocks so that it serves Orange Street. It serves the Amtrak station. It really doesn't affect the existing stops. There's one that kind of moves around the corner, and that's that. And then when we look at the times that service is provided, we did look at a lot of different alternatives about more later service or longer service on Saturdays, and the one that really our effective use of resources is extending 8 and 9 around the Chico State campus on Friday evenings and Saturdays when classes are in session and that need is there. So let's go on. I know it's a lot to cover. Why we think this is a good plan. And I will say it is a draft plan, so it can be changed. We're not saying this is the final plan, but it is in our draft plan. We've reduced the travel times on routes 2 and 5 by streamlining them a bit and making it 2-directional. We're improving the on-time performance. We think that the microtransit service better fits the market in those outlying areas. It and actually provides greater service to more people who are not right along those routes. And then we've got connection points, as I mentioned before, and then we've got direct fixed route service on Fair Street to the Jesus Center. So let's go south. Oops, no, let's go to a poll first. Katie, take it away.
Sorry about that. I got a new computer and all the controls are going a little bit nuts. And so that was great, Gordon. So what we want to do is take a little poll right now about what we had seen. And so if I can get the poll. So let's see here. And poll. Hold on. Oh, wait. Here we go. All right, so I have just launched on the screen, finally, a live poll about what Gordon had just said. And like he said, there's a lot of information to dissect. And so the first question we want to know is microtransit a good solution for these areas identified here in Chico? And again, feel free to put your comments into the chat box as well. We've also put a video about the microtransit into the chat box that you can save for after this meeting. Might help you explain a little bit more. So again, you can answer the first question, is microtransit a good solution for the areas identified? The second question is a little bit more complex, so I'm going to walk us through it. So would you use transit in Chico more with microtransit? So you're going to have 4 options. The first is, I currently do not use transit, but I would use microtransit. The second is, I don't use transit and I won't use microtransit. The third being, I do use transit and I think microtransit's a good idea. And the fourth is, I do use transit, but microtransit maybe is not the option for me. And so, and again, the final question, and would love for you all to participate, is do you agree with these proposed changes in Chico? And so again, I'm going to leave this open here for about a minute. Feel free to put any questions or comments into the chat box. I see some comments coming through, which is fantastic. And so again, we're going to keep this open. We've got about half the people who have participated so far. Ooh. I think we got some doodles on it. All right, I'm going to leave it open for just another second. All right, got one more person. Looks like we have 4 people.
Katie, I would be interested, for those who saying they would not use microtransit, is it because of the areas that we've identified? You just don't live in that area, you don't have a need to travel there?
Yeah,
So
again, that
could be a good chat comment.
Absolutely. And so again, I just shared the results here. Again, about 80% think that it is a good solution for this area. Kind of a mixed bag with people who either don't use transit or do use it. But again, about 50% who do use transit would use microtransit in this area. And about 70% agree with the changes. And again, we've gotten some comments into the chat box, which is fantastic. And so again, with that, I'll be back here in just a little bit with our next set of polls. But for now, I'm going to move it into Orville.
Okay, good. Now we're heading south.
Now we are.
And you can see a map there of what we are proposing for Oroville. As I mentioned, we have 2 vehicles that are operating in Oroville now. And the ridership overall doesn't warrant expanding that, but we've come up with a plan that we think is a better use of those 2 vehicles. So one of them would stay a fixed route bus, and it would, every hour it would alternate between 25, 26, and 27, these 3 relatively short routes. So it serves downtown, it serves the Walmart, and it serves the high school. It serves the area that we're getting most of the ridership. And then the second vehicle would be used to operate 2 different microtransit zones. And we've gone through the math on whether that's enough service, and we think that it is. So those would be the 2 microtransit zones you see on the north and then in the east. We have a little bit of ridership in the Thermalito area that could be served with a microtransit zone using the a dial-a-ride vehicle that can also have the capacity in that area to provide that service. So overall, what we've done is we've eliminated these low productivity fixed route services that go off into the county and don't serve very many people. We've expanded the transit service area. We think it gives us a good basis for improving ridership in the future as people get used to microtransit. And then this bus will be able to stay on time better. So that's kind of a quick summary on Oroville, and Katie has a poll.
Yes, I am back with a live poll. I apologize for the marks on the screen. We're trying to figure out how to take them out at the moment. Don't really know. But again, we're going to launch our 3rd poll. So again, same questions as we did in Chico, but right now we're talking about Oroville. So is microtransit a good solution for these areas that Gordon just discussed? The second was, would you use transit in Oroville more with microtransit? And the third is, do you agree? Oh, the third question is, again, I currently do use transit again, but would use microtransit. I do not use transit and would not use microtransit. I do use transit and would use microtransit, or I do use transit and would not use microtransit. And the final question is do you agree with the proposed changes in Oroville? And so like Gordon said, this might mention about where you're spending some of your time if you're not using transit in these areas. But again, especially if you're using transit in these areas, we would love your responses here on the screen, as well as your comments in the chat box. And yes, you can definitely put your votes in the chat. We'll be able to get them from there as well. But you should see the Zoom poll on your screen. Oh, I'm sorry. Question 2 is mislabeled. Would you use transit in Oroville more with microtransit? Choice 1 is yes. Choice 2 is no. All right. We've got about half the people who have participated so far. So I'm going to leave it up for just another minute and see if we get anyone else. I know we have some answers in the chat box as well. All right, but I'm going to share these results real quick. So again, 100% who voted for this area believe that microtransit is a good solution. About 67% thought that they would use transit in Oroville more with these microtransit. That's always great. And then, about 50% currently do not use transit, but would use microtransit, which I think that's a great one. And then 100% of the people who voted in this poll agree with the proposed changes in Oroville. So thank you all for participating. And with that, we'll move on to our next section. Let me stop sharing.
And so we're going up the ridge, and probably don't have to tell people that there's been a lot of challenges in Paradise and Magalia over the last 5 years or so. And some of those have really impacted the community. So we spent a lot of time looking at where the community is going and how the transit system can support that. And where we have what we've come up with here is what you can see on the right. First of all, we looked at the 2 fixed routes, and kind of an aha moment was when we saw that the longer route to Magalia was actually more riders per hour of service than the short route that loops around in Paradise and heads back down the hill. And thinking about kind of the long-term plan here, we feel it's best to combine those two into one route so that all of the services go through the whole corridor. Then the other thing, our other great sort of aha moment was when we started looking at the development patterns there, and that is the yellow squares that you can see, and of new development, and these are older, mobile home parks and parcels that are developing over time, but they are really quite spread out. And started thinking about, okay, what if we had a fixed route up there on the ridge and just could not connect all the dots very well, and really came to the conclusion that microtransit is a good solution up here too, to be able to provide service to these various areas and to support these new developments as they're happening. So again, this is a microtransit service that would be up on top of the ridge, serve that blue area. Any trip within that area, great, we'll take you to the grocery store and back. If you need to go down the ridge to Chico, we'll get you to a transit center or to a major stop, and then you can take the route there. This one does have a degree of trade-off, because right now there is 9 runs in one direction between the two routes and 5 in the other, at least to Paradise, and then basically 5 up to Magalia. To be able to afford the microtransit, we need to reduce the number of runs. So you can see that we're proposing 5 westbound daily runs and 4 eastbound. Those are timed so that they meet the key commute times, as well as some midday runs. So it's designed so that people up on the ridge can get down to Chico throughout the weekday or on Saturdays, for say a few hours in town, whether that's for shopping or for a medical trip or any other purpose down in the big city. So and the runs that we've cut were the runs that were really only carrying a few people. And so it is, there is no free lunch, and we're trying to do the best with the resources we have. But overall, what this does is really expand the reach of public transit and the abilities to get people to get around. I will just also tell you that in other areas, and I've been working with Truckee, California, which is a similar kind of mountain spread out area, and the riders love it. The passengers, the residents love it. So let's go on from there. You probably can imagine what I'm going to say here about what this overall does, but it does improve on-time performance for the fixed route. We're not stretching them as far as we had before. We've got more time per run. We're replacing with microtransit. We're serving a bigger area. And a little bit of a nuance that people might appreciate is that right now, if you live up there, you're paying the regional fare rate of $240 for a full ride trip. We're proposing this would become a local area because it's now got a local service. So transit fares become a little lower. And with that, we've got one more slide here before we do our last poll, looking at the other intercity routes. So let's go on to the next one, please. There's Route 20, which is quite a workhorse, lots of ridership. We've proposing to streamline that a little bit. Right now it does a different service in both directions, and to streamline that and make that a bit faster. We did look at adding more hours and service on that, and didn't find that to be effective. We've looked at the other 3 key routes, Gridley to Biggs on Route 30. That one's doing pretty well, and it's doing the right number of runs, so no changes there. There's Route 32, which is that goes through Durham, kind of does the direct route from Gridley up to Chico. Not very good ridership there, but it serves an important community that really needs the service. So we propose to keep that where it is. And then the final thing on this is that back even before the campfire, there was a route 31 from Paradise to Oroville. And we looked at the productivity of that and how effective that was, and decided that that was not a good use of funds to put that back in, that most of the people up on the ridge, they want to go to Chico rather than to Oroville. So that we're focusing the service on Paradise down to Chico. The other thing I'll say is that there's been a question about paratransit service, and we did look at paratransit service options, looking at the area that is served, and we're proposing no changes to that service area. We looked at expanding it, and it was very ineffective. We're already going 3 miles out, and then but we also could, with reducing the fixed routes, reduce the size of the paratransit service area. And we don't want to do that either. That should not be part of the plan. So essentially, as you look at these maps, we're keeping the paratransit service area the same. So with that, Katie, let's go back to our last poll.
All right, and it looks like we're getting a lot of great questions into our into our chat box. So we'll have a great question and answer session. But with this, I'm going to launch our last of our live polls. And so this is going to cover the areas that Gordon just covered. So the first question is, do you like the concept of providing microtransit to augment the fixed route services in these areas? The second is, do you like the idea of combining the 2 existing routes to one consistent route? And the third is, do you agree with the proposed changes in the inner city routes? And so again, it looks like we have some people who have been answering, which is great. So again, much like the other polls, you might just want to answer here if you're using these or in these areas. And again, if you want to put any extra, any others into the chat box or any extra comments into the chat box, we'll be taking them all into account. I'm going to leave it open for about another 30 seconds. We got most of the people who have already responded, and I love the results of this poll. So with this poll, we have 100% that like the concept of providing microtransit to augment the fixed route service. 89% likes the idea of combining the 2 existing routes into the one consistent route. And then about 60% agree with the intercity route changes, which is fantastic. Really love to see that. So again, thank you all for participating in our polls. I'm going to bring it back to Gordon, but I'll be back here in just a few for our question and answer session.
Right. Yes, and I have 3 more slides. So we're going to get there. All of that we've been talking about so far, we're calling the short-term plan or the near-term plan, with the ideas that it would be implemented within the next 5 years, probably starting next year, 2024. But we really haven't defined that yet. We wanted to make sure that we had the plan right before we started to schedule that out. But we also have within our scope for the study is to look a little further out at a midterm plan. And this is more of 5 to 10 years out. So it's a little bit more aspirational. And I don't have to tell anybody that there's a lot of effort these days to figure out ways we can reduce auto use, and we can reduce our emissions and everything. And when we start to look at where we could go, the real key thing that we're finding is to focus on these 2 routes in Chico and to add service so that it's every 15 minutes on routes 3 and 14. From the mall area to downtown to North Valley Plaza and through the campus. What we see as transit planners is once you get to 15 minutes or less service, transit gets a lot more convenient. You don't have to worry too much about the schedule. You can walk down to the transit stop, and well, if you've missed it by a few minutes, it's not too long to wait till the next one. So there really is kind of a kick up there. And then something else that I haven't talked about is transit signal priority at key intersections. And this does not mean that the bus always gets a green light, but this means that their chances of getting a green light is higher than it. And like if it's about to turn red or yellow and red when the bus is showing up, the signal can give it a few extra seconds to get through, and it's a real benefit to speeding transit service. So let's go, and that's kind of as far as we've gotten on the midterm plan. It does really need to build off the near-term success. Capital plan, how much is this going to cost in terms of the stuff we need for public transit? Microtransit actually reduces the number of stops. We are coming to your door. We're not coming to a bus stop, which is really nice on a windy and rainy day. We do have a few new stops that as we move some of the routes around, it reduces the number of peak buses that we need by 2. It does need 6 vans for microtransit in the various areas. For better or for worse, that's there's been such a reduction in the need for dial-a-ride vehicles, like the one on the right there, that we could use those in the short term for microtransit. In the longer term, there are smaller vehicles, if you know what a Sprinter van looks like. That sort of vehicle that is still wheelchair accessible, but it is more of a 8 to 10 passengers rather than 15 passengers. We need some money in the capital plan for the software that runs all the microtransit. And then we talked about the transit signal priority there. Also in our scope is to look at the fares. And we don't want to be raising fares. This is not a good time to be raising fares when our ridership is so down. But we did look at the fare structure, and I think our count was, if you look at the various ways to get on a bus in Butte County, there are 26 different ways that you can get on a bus, between day passes and 2-ride passes and monthly passes and full fare and half fare and so on. So one of the things we like to do is simplify that, because one of the things we know is that that's a real frustration to passengers. It's a big frustration to the drivers, and to tell you the truth, their job is hard enough. And it's a frustration when it gets all this, we have to account for it in the office. So what other systems are doing is getting rid of things like the 2-ride fare, which has got very low use, and replace it with a half fare with use of the day pass. And right now there is a day pass, but there's not a half fare day pass. So we would like to add one more way of getting on the bus, but this takes out like 8 different ways of getting on the bus and simplifies things. One thing that other systems are doing that we felt is appropriate is to expand the persons eligible for the discount fares to include veterans rather than seniors and disabled. Non-senior, non-disabled veterans could ride for half fare. And then, as I mentioned, the microtransit service can be would be provided at the same fares with the same discounts and so on. And my last slide is the next one here. So, what's the overall impacts of all these proposed changes? Well, we end up with almost no change in the hours of service, less than 1.6. It's like 0.6%. We get a little bit more of bit of an increase in Paradise and Magalia, just the way the math works out with microtransit, and essentially no change. It rounds to 0 in the other areas. So that tells us this is what we kind of set out to do, is to see what can we do with the existing resources and do it better. When we go through a lot of analysis and math on ridership and how more attractive these services will be, overall, we believe that this will generate a 9% increase in ridership, about 10% in Chico, between the route changes and the expanded service area, 16% up on the ridge with the microtransit, 2% in Oroville, 3% on the other routes. So you can imagine, if you are increasing ridership, but you're not increasing costs, you're really increasing the productivity and effectiveness of the transit program. And that's what we set out to do. So with that, Katie, I'll turn it back over to you, or to Sarah.
So with that, we have our question and answer session. So with that, I'm going to actually stop sharing the screen so that we can look at each other. And we have a bunch of questions that came in through the chat box. And so we're going to really start with the ones that came in during the presentation. And so the first one is, where is the service between Vallombrosa and East First Street? Vallombrosa and First Street and East First Street. Do we have service in between them?
I'm afraid I'm not aware of
There's service that runs along Mangrove, and then we would still have the micro transit zone that's taking over for Route 7, but there's not currently a need or a realistic way for us to go down between those two. Route 4 goes directly along first.
Got it. All right. We got a lot of questions about microtransit and how people would access it and use it. Jamie had a great question. Can students K through 12 use microtransit without supervision? Does microtransit only connect at transit transfer points, or can it go directly to the school?
Well, first of all, it's the same rules as the fixed route bus. So the answer is yes. Students can use it without a parent or guardian or adult supervising. If your school is within that zone, then yes, it can. You can take it directly to that zone. And we've in drawing those zones out, we tried to loop them in with when we could. There's a balance here of not making it too big so that it takes too long to serve all the trips. If the school is not in the zone, then I mentioned those key transfer points, and every one of the zones would have the key transfer points. There may be other bus stops because there are routes that go through some of those zones that you may find that's the more convenient thing for you. But the key thing is to get it into a transfer center and then transfer to other routes if it's a longer trip.
We had a question that came in. Do you know about going to Merriam Park? It looks like there's now some new doctor's offices and new eye doctor's offices over there. Will they have service over to Merriam Park?
I can take that one. So Merriam Park would be covered in our new microtransit zone. So you would have the opportunity of taking microtransit to access your eye doctor and other doctor's appointments there.
Great. Andrew asks, what changes are being made to better serve the outlying areas like the Butte College main campus?
I can take this one, Andrew. And I think we've had some discussions recently with Butte College staff about serving the main campus. And we received this request a few times over the years. And the long story short is that it would add an additional about 8 to 10 minutes in each direction to deviate from Route 20 to serve the main campus. And so a main goal that we have of this study is to improve on-time performance. And in order to make that deviation, we would actually need an additional vehicle as well. So we have 2 vehicles doing that run. We actually need a 3rd vehicle in order to accommodate that. So it's a little more complex than just shooting over to the campus and then jumping back on 99. It is something that we've looked into pretty closely, but as of right now, I don't think that we could accommodate the request to deviate from Route 20 to go to the main campus and then come back and go up towards Chico.
That makes sense. Thanks, Sarah.
Sure.
So Melissa asked a great question. This is a question that I would have. If there's an issue with time, how is combining three routes with one bus? Are they going to run once every 3 hours instead of 2?
No, they are very short routes. They're called different routes because every time it comes back into the transit center. But they're like 15 minutes, and 20 minutes for these routes, and then a layover for the rest of the hour, and then do the same thing over again the next hour. So this will be a busy driver, but overall, those 3 routes together are shorter than at least one of the existing 2-route systems. So it still is hourly service to everybody to every stop on those individual routes. But it will be more on time than it is now.
Got it. Maybe you know this, how many people will a microtransit bus hold?
Typically, what we have to put out on the road is 15, but it's almost never going to get that high, because you can work your way through the math of, if you've got to pick up people in a half an hour, you can only serve like 3 stops before you better start letting people off again. So it's a balancing act of putting out enough vehicles so that you can meet that. And typically they end up, you know, you're not riding by yourself. You're typically riding with maybe 1 or 2 other travel parties, and you'll pick up 2 people and then you'll drop off 1, you'll pick up 2 and you'll drop off 2, that sort of thing. It is very dynamic. It's more like what a taxi cab can do or an Uber does. And the driver has a tablet that they are following, just like in an Uber. So it does have capacity for wheelchairs. It can have capacity for bikes, and that can be part of it too.
Great. I'm encouraged by as many people in the chat that want to give it a try or want to kind of test it out and see how it works. James asks, what options would be available to add a Butte College main campus bus stop on 20?
I think I already answered this question, but it is something that we've gotten a few requests over the years, and as of right now, we aren't able to provide that service because it would be a deviation from Route 20 and add about 8 to 10 minutes in each direction. And also the capital side of needing to provide that service, we wouldn't be able to accommodate that right now.
Got it. This next question from Andrew, it might be for you, Sarah. It's kind of a bigger question. The college is currently looking for more sustainable alternatives to provide transportation to its students, and he wants to know if Beeline can be a part of that.
I'm not sure, Andrew, if you're referring to providing service to the main campus or if you're referring to Chico campus. So I'm not sure about that.
If you want to put, Andrew, are you talking about the main, since you just put a question in about the main? He wants to know, will microtransit buses be able to serve Butte College's main campus?
Yeah, as of right now, we aren't proposing as part of this study to extend our service area. And the main campus is currently out of our service area, so microtransit would not be serving the main campus.
Got it.
A big goal of this study is to look at improvements to the Beeline within existing resources. And as Gordon kind of alluded to in the midterm plan, that's when we would kind of think maybe outside of our existing resources, because at the end of the day, we are tapped at a certain point. And so trying to find ways to be creative and meet the needs of our riders within the existing service area is kind of a key component of this study.
Awesome. Jamie asked a question about ride passes. Will 2 ride passes still be honored? And they have some schools that buy them in bulk.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jamie. And so I think something that we should reiterate is that with these near-term changes to the system, we'd probably be rolling them out in 24, 25. So I think that we may have some time in between now and then to kind of phase out the 2 ride passes, but it's not like, you know, we do this workshop and then tomorrow we're getting rid of the 2 ride. I think we would have enough time to kind of do a little bit more outreach, let people know that those may or may not be phasing out. And then by that time that they're implemented, then people are probably not using them anymore.
Great. She also asked that Chico Unified is interested in a ride program similar to Chico State. Is there any plans on expanding that program type at all?
Which ride program are you referring to with Chico Unified?
think we're gonna give her a
Like,
second.
the students ride free program that Chico State pays for?
I think so.
I'm getting a thumbs up.
Mhm.
So are you thinking that Chico Unified would subsidize rides on Beeline for students? Okay. I think that's something we could look into eventually.
Jamie, are you referring to a more expansive program than the one you already do where you pay for their passes through Token Transit? Okay.
All right. Jamie also asked, can you add free fair days to give the public an opportunity to try it out? Could be a great way to introduce some of these concepts into the community. It's a great idea, Jamie.
Yeah, I can take that one. We actually are planning one for the fall. So we're working on that, and we would like to integrate more of that opportunity into our programs, our services. Another added benefit is it coincides with clean air days and things like that. So there are ways to integrate that, get people more excited about riding the bus and give them that opportunity.
Great. Jamie also asked, were drop-off or pick-off times adjusted for K-12 school schedules? Junior high and high school are good, but she feels that K-5 are a bit of a wait for the students.
I think go ahead, Gordon.
We have not looked at specifics with regards to the elementary schools, no.
I was going to add that it depends where the elementary school is located. If it's within a microtransit zone, there may be a little bit more flexibility in the times where students need to get to school. But it depends where the school is.
Yeah.
John also, to stay on the theme of the school, he asked, has the high school schedule been adjusted to accommodate the new state mandated change to the school day?
Yeah, I would just echo Gordon's response on that. And also, I'm not sure if we're referring to Chico or PV or a different high school.
All right, John asks, does our draft plan involve 1 or 2 microtransit vehicles for the Paradise Magalia area? Do we know how many?
It starts out with 1, and what we think that will be pretty busy at the peak times. And we've talked about if a second one is needed to meet that, to get into the details, it would be 90% of the trips served within 30 minutes of the request. And if we can't meet that, then a second van would be used.
Got it. All right. And again, feel free to keep putting a lot of comments in the chat box, which is great. These are all going to go into our meeting summary and make sure that they get part of the draft plan. But again, how many new riders, Gordon, this might be a good question for you. How many new riders do you need before a service like Beeline would expand outside its existing resources?
A typical number, I don't have the number at hand for, well, let me back into this a little bit. Beeline does not have any like adopted standards, like you must serve at least X per hour of service. That we often look at the riders per hour because most of the costs associated with running a bus have to do with paying the driver, not buying the fuel, despite what you might think about fuel costs these days. But as planners, we tend to look at if service is generating over 8 or 10 passengers per hour, then we're looking at adding that service. There are services now that are less than that, which is why we've done some of the tweaks that we have. The other sort of caveat I would say is that typically lower standards are used for more rural areas where people can be more dependent on having to do like lifeline service. But to tell you the truth, that was the idea of looking at the various communities in beyond the existing service area. It's not something that was within the scope of this study.
Great, thank you. Yeah, again, John, I hear you. It'd be great to have a pickup at both the Chico high schools around 350. Again, that is the end of our questions. Again, there is a lot of comments into the chat box. We really, really appreciate all of the comments. We are here to answer any more questions. And again, yeah, John, please keep adding any comments to the draft plan. We also, I'm posting in in the chat box now, a link. We have a draft plan available at beelinedraftplan.com. This is going to be open. We have surveys. We have places where you can comment. You can dive into elements of the plan. We have videos about how the microtransit service would work, and we'll explain to you exactly how that service would look outside your door. We would encourage you to share this website with your friends, with your colleagues, with people throughout the area so that we can get as many comments and as many eyes on this as possible. So we would love to, again, get as many of your eyes and feedback as much as possible. But if you have any other questions, we'll be on the line here for, again, we're here until about 6:30. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you all might have. But again, I'm going to bring the screen back up really quick so we can at least share. Oh, wait, I don't want to play from the start. Sorry, you're going to have to shift through the slides really quick. We wanted to make sure that you understand that we're going to be at the Chocolate Festival on May 13th. We're going to be at the Chico's Farmers Market, I believe on May 20th, that week after. Again, I put the Beeline draft plan in the chat box. You can stay involved on our website here, or contact Sarah. She has put her email address right on the screen here for you to email her as well. But we do encourage you all to stay involved with the draft plan, to keep your comments coming and to be able to share it as much as possible with our community members. John asks a question: did the town of Paradise approve of the cancellation of even more Paradise to Chico runs on top of the runs that were canceled after the campfire?
So, I guess there isn't really an approval that's needed from the town of Paradise. It's the public transit system. So as the owner and operator, we have presented this to our board of directors earlier in April. And now we're doing the public outreach and hoping for comments and just to hear from you all on your thoughts on this. But we have shared this with representatives from the town of Paradise, and that's kind of part of this outreach tonight, is hearing from people, and we'll be continuing this at other outreach events as well.
Sarah, I was just going to add to, we go through an annual unmet needs transit process. So while we're talking about potential changes we might implement, every year BCAG goes through an annual unmet transit needs process. So we get public testimony and hearings and evaluate that to determine if, additional service should be added. But as Sarah said, whenever we make changes to the fixed route or paratransit system, those are all reviewed with our board and okayed before we take action.
Great, thank you, John. And so again, with that's, again, we're going to be here. I'm going to keep it open for about the next 10 minutes or so in case anyone else signs in, kind of joins us late, or if anyone has any other questions. Again, we know that this is a lot of information to kind of go through. That's why we have set up the website, the beelinedraftplan.com. It's your opportunity to be able to dig into some of these plans, read some of the changes. We also have posted our existing conditions report. We've posted workshop summaries from the first 2 workshops. So feel free to get involved on that page there. But with that, I want to thank everybody for coming to our 3rd and final Beeline workshop routing study workshop. It's been great having you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you.